Moving forward on bilateral cooperation, the leaders of Singapore and Indonesia discuss working together on the green economy as both sides celebrate the big strides in their long-standing relationship. And for more, we're joined now on Zoom by Shoeb Kagda. He's a long-time political observer of Singapore-Indonesia relations. He's currently Centre Director of Singapore Management University's Overseas Centre in Jakarta, and he is also founder of the Indonesia Economic Forum. Good evening to you, Mr. Kagda. First off, thank you for joining us. Briefly remind us why the Singapore-Indonesia relationship is so vital to both countries.
Hello, and thank you for having me here. I think the relationship between Singapore and Indonesia, I think you can describe it as being a symbiotic relationship over many, many decades. The two countries have built both on economic ties, military defense ties, and I think more recently, in terms of the new economy, a digital cooperation too has become a center point in the relationship. And the two countries have always refreshed and progressed in their relationship, both through their leaders, as well as through their business communities and through their people.
You mentioned the cooperation in the digital sphere. At today's retreat, both leaders also agreed to cooperate on new issues like the green economy, on carbon storage as well. What are the key areas are also important for Indonesia and Singapore to work on together going forward?
Well, Indonesia's digital economy is going to be one of the largest in Asia. Today, I think it is valued at just under $100 billion. It will double over the next decade or so. But there is a huge lack of digital talent within Indonesia. And I think this is where Singapore really can come and play a very important and pivotal role in terms of helping Indonesia develop its digital talent. Prime Minister Lee and I think President Jokowi also talked about the green economy, which is going to be very critical for Indonesia's energy consumption and production going forward. Today, of course, Indonesia is one of the largest producers of coal. But given global warming and climate change, the need to transition towards a greener energy mix is going to be very important. And I think this is one area where the two leaders really had a very good and I think a deep discussion.
What we also saw today, Mr. Kagda, was a unique sort of image there. Two leaders there and two leaders about to take over as leaders. What do we know about the personal ties, though, between Mr. Lawrence Wong, the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, and Mr. Prabowo Subianto, the President-elect?
Well, yeah, it is historic in the sense that, we have two very popular and very highly respected leaders exiting at about the same time, and two new leaders coming in. But Mr. Prabowo, the president-elect, I think is no stranger to many Singaporean leaders. He has been an active leader, government leader, as a defense minister over the last few years. And of course, prior to that, he was a general in the Indonesian military. It remains to be seen how the incoming Prime Minister, Mr. Lawrence Wong, and President-elect Prabowo kind of find that chemistry between themselves, which I think Prime Minister Lee and President Jokowi had. The personal chemistry, I think, is very critical in terms of understanding each other's political and social cultural nuances. The two countries are very close, but in many ways they're very different. The business culture is very different. And I think that understanding of what each other's needs are, and what having that same mindset and speaking the same language in that sense is going to be very critical going forward, especially given the growing geopolitical uncertainty.
Well, foreign policy is indeed a very nuanced topic at the best of times. In terms of that personal relationship, though, Mr. Hsien Loong and also Jokowi, they have known each other for a long time. As Hsien Loong's principal private secretary, DPM Lawrence Wong would have had exposure to some facets of foreign policy as well. Do you think, in your opinion, that these two men, Mr. Lawrence Wong and Prabowo Subianto, have the same or something akin to a similar personal relationship that we've seen in the top leadership of these two countries?
Well, I think I honestly wouldn't know what the level of personal relationship between them is, but I can be very confident that, given the close ties between the two countries, and as you mentioned, neither of them are strangers to each other. They would have had multiple opportunities to engage and to share views and ideas and thoughts. So I believe that, yes, going forward, both Mr. Lawrence Wong and President-elect Mr. Prabowo will strike up a different sort of relationship than what Prime Minister Lee and President Jokowi had. But probably they're both coming from a kind of a different background. They will both be leading their nations in a different era, so to speak. But they will be building on the foundations that have been laid over many decades. So I am quite confident that the strong bilateral relationships will continue under the two new leaders. But they will have to find the new chemistry between themselves.
And as they do that, and as both of these two leaders take over the baton of their respective roles, do you think there will be outstanding matters that these two new leaders are going to have to deal with? And if so, what might they be?
Well, I think in terms of overall challenges or even contentious issues between the two countries, most of them have been settled. I mean, recently, of course, one of the longest-standing issues was, the airspace that Indonesia wanted to reclaim, which they have now. In the past, there have been a long-standing discussions and trying to forge through some kind of agreement on financial matters. Of course, Indonesia has always wanted greater transparency of Indonesian deposits and assets in Singapore. And there is now closer cooperation between, I think, the financial institutions of both countries. So in that sense, I don't think there are any outstanding issues. But going forward, I do believe that there will be new issues, especially given the fast pace of change, the growing uncertainty. And I think one area where the two countries will really have to do work closely together is on the geopolitics, given the ongoing global uncertainty. Of course, Indonesia has a young, growing population, a growing middle class. This growing middle class, which is now about 150 million strong, will have new aspirations, and they also are becoming, in a way, nationalistic, but in a positive way, where they're very proud of being Indonesians. They don't want to be seen to be kowtowing to other countries. But that partnership with Singapore is, as I mentioned earlier, symbiotic in the sense that we both depend on each other. We rely on each other in terms of difficult times. And both countries have come to each other's assistance in many ways. I remember covering the tsunami that affected Indonesia. Singapore was one of the first countries to send soldiers and aid to Aceh, where and I think that sort of ready to help your neighbor attitude and disposition is going to be very critical.
Mr. Kagda, thank you very much for your insights this evening. Shoeb Kagda, there, a long-time political observer of Singapore-Indonesia relations.